hold on, I got to grant access. Hold on.
That's interesting. We're getting it as a reflection in the picture behind you.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna do this. I'll probably be gone for just a second. I'll come right back if I do.
We got it.
Okay, is it working?
Oh, no, I meant we understand.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it's not.
It's not working yet.
All right, hold on.
Oh, here it comes. There it
Okay.
is.
There.
Good.
Marquette
All right.
Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. So MBRA.
So now do you see the presentation?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. So what I'm going to try to do is just cover three things very quickly so that there's time for you guys to ask us questions. We can have a discussion. One, I just want to explain what brownfield authorities are and how they work. I want to address pretty directly our view of how brownfield work in Marquette affects the library. And then I want to just briefly talk about some of the particular sites where we've been working on and are going to be working on in the coming year, because you'll probably be hearing about those. So that's the three topics I'm going to try to cover. It's just a few slides. So first of all, what brownfield is at its core, it's a financing tool that relies on taxes as a financing tool to cause redevelopment of sites which are very unlikely to be redeveloped otherwise. And the kinds of sites that we're talking about traditionally are contaminated sites, sites that have had some sort of industrial use or some other kind of activity, which has led to contamination of the site. But in Michigan, those types of sites have been expanded to include also sites which are blighted, are functionally obsolete, and even that have been designated as historic in some way. So there's actually quite a few different kinds of sites that can benefit from brownfield as a finance authority. The primary tool is these things called TIFs, tax increment financing, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. The thing to keep in mind is that the kinds of work that can be done all have to be done under brownfield plans that are explicitly approved by both the Brownfield Authority and the City Commission. It only applies to particular sites which qualify under the state statute, and it only applies to certain eligible activities at those sites. In addition, in order to get the state part of the capture, of the tax capture, it has to also be approved by both EGLE and EDC at the state level. The fundamental argument I'd like to try to make, both to the library but to the community at large, is that without the brownfield catalyst, redevelopment does not occur at these kinds of sites that we were talking about. And without redevelopment, the tax revenue remains depressed at those sites. With brownfield redevelopment, the baseline tax revenue, that is the taxable level for property taxes at the site at the beginning of the project, is never affected. So whatever taxes are coming in at the beginning of a brownfield project, those revenues continue to come in and are never captured, whatever's happening with the brownfield. So the tax revenue never goes down. It stays level even as the property taxes go up. With the brownfield redevelopment, tax revenue goes up a lot. And then after the extraordinary costs of the brownfield site because of the contamination or whatever else, then the library and other taxing jurisdictions realize the increase after those brownfield costs are paid off. The idea behind this is that it's worth making this kind of investment because there are extraordinary costs at these kinds of sites to get any kind of redevelopment at all. And the whole reason that these statutes were put in place both nationally and at states around the country is because there was industrial blight occurring where industrial sites got used, they got abandoned, and then new industries moved to a new place, new green space, and developed those, leaving the brown sites behind. And so this was a way to try to redirect that kind of development back to the industrial site so that we don't get these rings of green space being used up and the brownfield being left behind with no tax revenue and no other kinds of uses. When done properly, brownfield authorities and brownfield programs increase the density of development, they increase the investment in particular places, and it increases the tax base. The way to think of these brownfield TIFs is as an investment by all the taxing authorities for economic development with significant future returns, and returns that probably would not otherwise occur were it not for the brownfield program. The other thing is when we approve these sites, these local sites for state funding as well under brownfield, then we capture all the state taxes, and all those state taxes then get used to leverage all of these extraordinary activities, and it pays them off much more quickly. And it's almost as if you're getting a state grant. It's not actually a grant, but it's a same effect of a state grant by funneling state money into these local sites, and which are used for the same sorts of economic development and also public infrastructure. These are just pictures of sort of before and after around town. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about each of them. I'll just mention that the big sites are, of course, the hospital, the new hospital. That's the largest project we've done. There's a whole series of projects down at the Founders Landing, sort of just east of downtown. You can see in the upper left corner, that's the sort of the before, and then some of the buildings for after, pier development, things like that. There are these buildings on the second line. You see it's the old bread factory, and this is the Staybridge and UPHP and those new buildings there. And then there are also some smaller sites around town. So we'll spend a little bit more time right at the end talking about some of those, but this is just sort of a glimpse of before and after. Now, I want to get into some of the specifics about why we think that this benefits the library and the other taxing jurisdictions around town. Founders Landing, Liberty Way, the new hospital would not have proceeded in their current form without these brownfield TIFs. They just wouldn't have occurred. They probably would have occurred in some form, but not necessarily where they are, and not necessarily with the same sort of success or size of development, and certainly not the public infrastructure. These projects have also led to a lot of growth, spin-off growth in the same areas around there, especially West Washington Street, which occurs immediately and is above and beyond the sites themselves and the increased tax revenue. Here are some hard numbers, and these are from the city treasurer, actual property values and property tax revenues before and after the brownfield project. So at Founders Landing, the initial taxable value was 0, and the initial tax revenues was 0. Currently, the value is just under 18 million, and the tax revenues are just under 800,000, which gives the library about 26,000 in revenue. Liberty Way started off at $220,000 in value and went to 10.3 million. So the revenues went from 11,000 to 500,000, which translates to about 15,000 for the library. Nestle Down, which is the bed and breakfast near Picnic Rocks, initial value was 61,000, went to about 226,000. Revenues went from 3,000 to about just under 12,000, 309 for the library. Hospital, the initial value was 0. It went to 128 million. And so the taxes that came in went from 0 to 3.2 million, which translates to almost 97,000 for the library. 221 Patisserie, which is the little place just on the west side of downtown, went from 33,000 to 390,000. And you can see the revenues went up from about a little under 2,000 to a little under 20,000. So the total, you've gone from 16,000 in revenues in taxes to 9 million a year, 139,000 for the library. Now, all these properties, only properties which qualify as brownfield, that is contaminated, blighted, obsolete, historical, and are specifically approved under plans by the Brownfield Authority and the city, and also the state if there's state taxing involved. It's only those particular kinds of properties that can qualify for this kind of work. And only certain kinds of expenses at those sites qualify. There's specific environmental things, clean up and things that you have to do to make the site safe. Lead and asbestos abatement and demolition, site preparation and infrastructure are the only things which can be included under these brownfield captures. So how does it work? At the beginning of the project, there's an initial taxable value, which is established. And that taxable value continues through the whole project. So there's still taxes on that initial value, whatever it is. So if it starts off at 5,000, it still stays at 5,000 even during the brownfield project. Then investment occurs from developers and the taxable value increases. And the developer then pays property taxes, which are captured by the Brownfield Authority to pay off those extraordinary costs, those specific eligible activities at those specific sites, so that all of those are paid off by the property taxes that are being paid until all the brownfield activities are paid off. Those eligible activities get reimbursed over time. Then when they're all paid off for another 5 years, the brownfield captures the TIFs for another 5 years, which goes into a local revolving fund for future projects. Then after that, the increased taxes go to the taxing jurisdictions. And here's a graphic to show what that looks like. If you look at the bottom, you see the sort of orange part of the bar. That's that initial value. You see this is time along the x-axis, in this case, from 2018 out through 2046. And you've got the property value on the left, on the y-axis, which goes up over time. So property taxes go to the normal taxing jurisdictions for that orange bar all the way through. But then because of the development, the values and taxes go up. And you see that with the blue, magenta, and green bars. The blue bars is that period of time where the taxes are being used to pay off the brownfield eligible activities at the sites. The magenta bars show the 5 years that go into the revolving fund. And then the green bars are the additional or the higher amount of taxes that are coming into all the other jurisdictions after the brownfield is over into the future. Those green bars would not occur if the brownfield hadn't gotten over the hurdles, which are paid for with these blue bars. And so while it's true that taxing jurisdictions like the library don't get this increased value represented in the blue and magenta bars, they have to wait a little while. They do get them soon in the green bars. And without the brownfield, the green bars never would occur. So that's the idea behind brownfield. Here's just a pie chart of the actual property tax allocation in the city of Marquette. You can see the state taxes, the city taxes, county taxes, and then library, heritage trail, all the others. You can see how they break out, just for information. I mentioned this earlier, but when we get approval from the state, we're actually able to leverage the state taxes to pay off these extraordinary costs using the state taxes as well. And you can think of those as sort of almost a grant from the state to fund these. And you can see the amounts on our particular sites. The amount that came in from the state for Founders Landing is a little over 14 million, Liberty Way a little under 7 million, et cetera, down the chart. So a total of about 59 million in state tax capture came to the Marquette community from these particular projects. There's been some discussion at the city. Some of the commissioners have mentioned a desire to try to find some ways to get money in some way funneled to some of these other jurisdictions sooner, including the library, especially the library. And we wanted to point out that there's this Recodified Tax Increment Financing Act, okay, which includes provisions for exemptions or opt-outs for the library millages from captures from DDAs and LDFAs and some other TIFs under some circumstances. And that's great. And the libraries around the state have been able to take advantage of that. And that's wonderful. But there's no comparable provision in the Brownfield Redevelopment Financing Act that we operate under. So it's just simply not possible under the statute that we operate under to do a similar sort of exemption or opt-out for the library or anyone else. And I would just note that even as a theoretical basis, I'm not sure it would make a lot of sense to try to change that law to allow it, because that would potentially make the difference between catalyzing enough to get some of these sites over the hurdle at all. And so you might actually end up not being able to do some of the projects at all, which would be, that would be sort of self-defeating. So the direct question is, do libraries lose revenue because of Brownfield? And I think that in general, and there can be exceptions to this, and we can talk about some of that in the discussion point here afterwards. But in general, private investment wouldn't occur at most of these sites, or would be much smaller without the Brownfield incentives. And that means the long-term revenues are going to be significantly increased above that unaltered baseline, where the taxes are not affected as the Brownfield obligations are paid off. And these projects do also sort of lead to spin-off development around them, like in West Washington, which causes an immediate benefit through revenues. So I think that our Brownfield projects, this is certainly the view of the authority that I sit on, helps to make Marquette vibrant, attracts residents, visitors, private investment. It leads to a lot of infrastructure improvements that would not occur with just normal development. Even if somebody did develop some of these sites, there's no way that they would pay for some of the public infrastructure that we're able to get put into these projects. And the bottom line is we've leveraged about $59 million in state funding for Marquette through this program. And the way we always think of it is it's an investment by all of the taxing jurisdictions to realize significant returns a little bit down the line. I'm not going to spend much time on this. I just want to this is sort of, you can just see there's a list of things that we've worked on in the last year. So this is a very active program. There's a lot going on right now. There's a lot coming up in the coming year, at the places that I showed you pictures of and talked about before. Those are all going to continue. There are some sites like the Upper Peninsula State Bank, that's the Burger King, a little bit west of downtown in Washington. There's the Customs House, which is just north of Founders Landing, Beacon House on the hospital property. Those are all things which are going to be coming up. Founders Landing is going to have additional development beyond what's already been done there. So there's going to be a lot happening this coming year. And we're going to be trying to do a lot of community outreach, just like we're doing here with you folks, to sort of explain what we're up to and why hopefully it makes sense. We do realize that there are controversies way beyond just the question of whether libraries should have to wait until they realize these revenues. But we know that there are concerns in the community about development pressure near the lakeshore, and there's a feeling that anything which helps development happen quicker and more easily, even at these difficult sites, if it's near the lakeshore, there's worry about getting overdevelopment at the lakeshore. We're very aware of that. It's not something we've figured out how to solve yet, but we're aware of it and hoping to keep that in mind as we move forward. There are a lot of questions about workforce housing instead of just really high-end housing, really expensive housing, especially at the lakeshore. So, great views and all that. And the developers want to put in high-end housing. Helps the tax revenue, but, Marquette has to struggle with some of these other questions about, do we have places that ordinary people can live? And so we're looking for ways to do that. We're thinking there may be some ways to do that with that revolving fund that I mentioned earlier. One of the big sites that's likely to, it's already a brownfield site and there's already a developer interested. So this Cliffsdale site, sort of just north of Pictured Rocks, south of Presque Isle, is a contaminated site. It's a former Superfund site. There's still contamination there. So there's a lot of questions about what should the timing be for when development occurs there, what type of development should be there, will it be safe, et cetera. There's a lot of controversy around that I think will continue. And then just sort of what is the priorities? What does the city want to do? What do developers want to do? What does the Brownfield want to emphasize? What does the public hope to see? There are the power plant sites, the old hospital site, the Cliffsdale site. Where should we be putting our efforts? And so we're struggling and tackling those issues as we move forward. And that's it. I'm going to see if I can stop sharing my screen. Which, let's see, where do I find, here we go. Here, I've got 3 screens running. That's part of my problem. Here we go. And now, well, I don't see it. Can you stop? Oh, here, I see. I got it. Stop share. There. Good.
Well done.
There we are.
So I'm happy to answer questions or let Mac or Sherry answer questions, depending on who knows the most about it. Love to hear any of your thoughts.
David, this is Rick Orr, Finance Director at Peter Wright Public Library. And first let me say, I think the enhancements to the community are very obvious, and I agree with it. But as a finance director of the library, it's trying to figure out the budgeting side of things at the library. And so this means for a number of years, we're going to have a pretty flat revenue stream for the library. And so I guess the one specific question that I'm just curious how it works, in the case of Burger King, where there was a tax, an assessed value on that, the taxes were paid on. Is that based on when the building was there, or now that the building has been taken down, are we just getting the tax revenue based on the property itself? And the reason I asked that question is more for the old Duke Light Point complex, which we're still getting a fair amount of tax revenue to the library from that project. But if it just turned out to be the property, then that would be very much reduced going forward. So
Yeah, so that baseline that's captured at the beginning is the value when the project starts. So it's not the same value that would be if it were a vibrant functioning Burger King. It's going to be less than that. It's whatever the current actual property value is when we start the project. That will, that part won't be affected moving forward, but you don't get the value that it would have been in the past before it became obsolete and abandoned.
So, but it would have included the building, some value for the building that was there plus property.
I believe that's right, Mac. Is that
Okay.
right?
Yeah, I'll just clarify that. And actually, the Brownfield Act allows for you to set the initial taxable year at the current value or the next year's value. And we actually did in that particular case. So you picked that up well. I think that the value would be set at primarily the land value and would not include the building in that particular case. All of the others have not been that way, but in that particular case, we did set that forward to begin that capture a little more quickly. But yes, so that would affect the library's revenues on that small project.
Mhm.
So am I understanding? So basically with that one, it didn't include the tax revenue going forward, will not include the old building that was demolished.
That's correct.
Now, and that's relatively small, but you look at the old hospital complex, and that's a significant, if the same thing happened there, that'd be a significant, because we would go from 35,000 or 40,000 is what we're currently probably getting from that abandoned campus down to who knows what. Yeah, so
Yeah,
a much smaller number. Yeah.
Yeah, and that would be a big consideration, and I think we'll look at that, understanding that concern or that issue there for what taxes are generated now for that. It's not too big. It's a few $100s probably for the library for the Burger King project, but as you say, and I think I look back, I got some information from Mary, and that's kind of the weird thing in the hospital, because there wasn't any taxes on it for a long time. Went public, and then so I think I'd look back and you were getting about $70,000 or so, and then as it's gone down.
Yeah, I think at our peak we were about 85,000 the first year, and then they did the tax tribunal, and I think it got set down to 70 or 75.
Yeah, I think
And then
that
I believe it might have been adjusted down further, and so we were at about 60,000 this this most recent tax year before they moved into the new complex.
Yeah, and it's continued to drop and will drop in that case. So, but yeah, yeah. So I
And
think
I haven't gotten a specific number of what it's now assessed at. And I'm guessing we're at about 35 or 40.
But I think that's a real important consideration in that particular case, because there is such a significant tax base that will, need to accommodate that somehow in that plan. But that's a great point.
How would we know that information? How is that information disclosed?
Through the Brownfield plan, but I think that all the folks here heard that, and understand that concern, and the same would be true for all of the taxing jurisdictions. You saw that the city has about 24%, and so they have a strong interest in these issues as well. So I think, we heard that well and can understand that and could talk about that, how we structure that Brownfield plan to have, to be able to provide an appropriate incentive, but also to provide, opportunity or revenues for the taxing jurisdictions.
Yeah, and I just add to that, I mean, there's the standard answer of, well, we're a public body and it's their public plans and anybody can comment on, but it's much more than that. We're keenly aware, the authority is keenly aware of these issues for the library, and not just the library, but especially the library, which is why we're here. And I think that you can expect that we will want to make sure that you're, you don't have to find it somewhere in a Federal Register or something. We'll make sure it's happening and get you in the loop and have that conversation with you. And the City Commission is going to be very, very interested in these issues as well. So.
Well, I will say when we were on the ballot for the Headley override proposals, I was really surprised how many people came to me and said, I'm not going to vote on the library's millage because Brownfield's getting all your money. And I was like, whoa, that is not what I expected to hear from people who I see in the library every single week and I know are very strong supporters. And my only, information recourse at that point was to say, oh, please don't take that viewpoint because we're still getting the bulk. We just have to disclose in our ballot language that the Brownfield will be capturing part of our tax revenue. And I think in order for us to have those conversations with the public, it would benefit the Brownfield to give us that type of information so that we can say our tax revenues are, they're flat, yes, but eventually they will increase. But, that has led to some of our anxiety about Brownfield projects and concern about whether or not we're getting accurate information because we have the public to respond to, and people do come ask us those questions. So I think it would behoove you all as much as us to have as much information as possible that we can provide to the public when they ask us those questions, because they do.
Yeah, I agree. And we heard some of the same things. I mean, during the Headley amendment discussion, and it's distressing to us too, because it's not good for us to be seen as sort of leeching off of everyone else and stealing everyone's money. I mean, that's not what's happening, but there is that perception, and we have to do a better job of explaining what we're up to the general public. And again, I'm not even saying that everyone's going to always agree with what we do. I mean, I think there'll be controversies and people will disagree with some of our choices, but I think this particular one, I think we can convince most people that we're not in fact stealing other people's money. So.
Yeah, and I think there's two things about that. One is probably, it looks like everything, the Brownfield Authority is taking everything, and they are limited to projects. It's a little different than a DDA, which, sets a boundary and then captures all the taxes for 30 years and figures out what to spend on that, with that money. That the Brownfield Authority is limited to those specific projects, and it's limited to those activities which are included in a Brownfield plan. As soon as those are paid off, then the dollars go back to the taxing jurisdiction. So kind of maybe we need to look at what is the full tax base of the city of Marquette, and then what is the kind of captured tax base. It's a relatively small amount. Now the hospital skews everything, but I'll also say that the hospital is going to pay off in about half the time that we thought it was, or that we projected, because we only assumed a $170 million investment, and the investment is more like 350 million. And so we've kind of done some of those projections, and that's going to be paid off in about 12 years instead of the 24 years that we were looking at for that kind of size. of
And it's
project.
not 12 more years from now. It's 12 years total.
That's 12 years total. Yeah, so about
Right.
in about 8 years or so,
Right.
that project should be paid off, and that's going to be a substantial amount at that time to all the taxing jurisdictions. So,
That
And
leads to my, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
That leads to my question, which is there like an average length of time, or does it always depend on what the project is? I guess I don't understand the timeline.
Go ahead, Mac.
Yep, it is variable.
Mhm.
And it depends on the amount of investment and how much taxes are generated, and the amount of eligible activities that happen. And so that amount, how long will that take off to pay off those eligible activities?
Okay.
And I just want to say that in these projects, in the Founders Landing project, as well as the DLP project, there's significant infrastructure. I mean, almost half of the expenditures these are public infrastructure. They're not just paying developers for their costs. They're actual public infrastructure costs that are there. It's going to pay for the pier, which may not have been able to have been built. It paid for the seawall boardwalk, the Berriga Street extension, some of the improvements along Lakeshore for the Founders Landing project, and paid for the relocation of the municipal services building and the road improvements. Now, granted, those were for the hospital, but also those were kind of the public. And that's the reason that those projects extend out a little bit farther, because we have this large amount. Typically, the Nestle Down project is already paid off. That's going back to the taxing jurisdictions. The Liberty Way project, because that had underground parking and allowed for a whole lot more density on that project. My estimates were that over a 30-year period, there's going to be $11 million more in revenues than there would be had they just been able to put up the M-Bank building and had to cover it with parking, had to have surface parking there. So there's a cost to that. But even with all that investment, there's $11 million more over a 30-year period coming back to the taxing jurisdictions. So, that's a little bit of that balance. But hopefully that answered your question. It does depend on the project, but the ones that extend out a long time, we don't want projects where, there's only private activities and they're going to be paid out for a long time. That just doesn't make sense. But for a lot of those longer projects, they have an awful lot of public investment associated with them.
I guess with Founders Landing, which now that started a number of years ago, at what point will we expect it on the part of the library to start to receive tax revenue from that project?
Yeah, that's the one that's going to extend for a while just because of the extent of the project. That is another one. In underground parking is part of an infrastructure improvement that is an eligible activity. So that's a big ticket item that's included in there, as well as the pier and the other public improvements. So that's one that's extended out quite a ways.
Okay.
Do you remember, Mac, can you put a finer point on that? When is that? When do we now expect?
Yeah, it's almost the maximum amount of capture is 30 years. And I think that one is close to 25 to 27 years. It kind of depending on how things play out here with the next stage of development.
And it wasn't done in phases. So even though the condominiums were the first phase, it's 30 years for the whole project, not individual components.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, that's right. From 2009, we started with the large Brownfield plan, and that was the beginning of that 30-year period. And then each of those projects have continued on for that, but no later than 2039.
Okay.
I wanted to add one thing. We talk about state capture, and that is a really important factor, is that we can leverage like a 46% state grant basically for these dollars. But I also wanted to emphasize that schools are held harmless in that arrangement. It's the state education tax and school operating tax there, but the schools are held harmless. They still get their formula, still get the school aid formula per student allocation. So we're not, in essence, the schools are held harmless. I know you wish the libraries were held harmless, but
Yeah.
We do.
yeah,
Yes, we do.
understand.
Yes, we do.
Understand.
Are there other questions or comments?
I guess, David, I guess this is Patrick. I've got a quick question. You had given a figure of 59 million that Brownfield has pretty much gotten from Marquette that wouldn't have been gotten. How long of a time frame is that? I have no idea how long this stuff has been going on. I've heard the term Brownfield since I moved to Marquette over 30 years ago, I think. But so how long of a time frame has it taken to capture that 59 million?
Mac, I'm going to let you answer that.
Okay, that will be kind of the end result after the Brownfield projects that are currently in place will be paid off.
Okay.
So that includes Founder's Landing.
Okay.
It includes DLP are kind of the two big contributors to that.
Right.
And like I said, DLP will be done in about 8 or 9 years, and Founders will extend out. So
Right.
that will be the cumulative state proportion of those costs.
From the first time that this activity happened on behalf of Marquette until.
Yeah, 2009 kind of started everything. There were a few Brownfield plans that were done in the early 2000s.
Right.
But most of all the more recent activity has happened since 2009.
Sure. Okay, great. Thank you.
And so on the Duke Life Point, because the way it was presented at the library and the way we understood it, it was 12 years to pay it off and then an extra 12 years of replenishing the brownfield or something along that. So we were looking at like 24 years, but if I'm understanding the way you're presenting it now is it'll be paid off in 8 years, but then will there be an extension of 8 years or 12 years?
Yeah, the original plan had most of the eligible activities paid off in, I believe, 21 years. And then we had the additional local brownfield fund that I think we just limited because it was going to be so large. We limited to 3 years or 4 years.
Okay.
So with this dropping back to 8 years, we'll have 3 or 4 years of additional capture for that local brownfield fund. We've already reduced that a little bit. And, as we look at revenues, the authority may say, look, that's enough. Let's get the dollars back. So, but that's
so roughly about half of what
it's about half of what we anticipated, right?
Okay.
Exactly.
That's good news for the library for sure.
Yeah. And I'll just provide a technical clarification for that. We did bond for that, and so they're 20-year bonds, and so there'll be some capture, over that time to pay off those bonds, unless they're paid off more quickly. So I'll just, there may be a portion that still continues to go to pay off those bonds, but it will come back unless the city wishes to pay off the bonds early.
Okay.
But the library should start seeing significant revenues after about 8 years from now.
This is Carol, and I have a couple questions. I find this a little bit difficult to handle because I don't understand. I'm kind of back on Ann's question. I don't understand whether we can tell ahead of time how long it's going to take before these generate money when the bond is paid off. My second question is, to be really blunt, it feels like there's just more and more brownfield development going on, and I'm not against the philosophy, but you kind of wonder where it stops. One of my concerns driving around Marquette is the number of empty buildings. What's the likelihood that Shopko and Office Max and some of those things will eventually go to brownfield? Because I think you included that brownfield could include properties that are basically obsolete. It's kind of like Burger King. If that's what we've got to do to get something there, I have no idea what the revenue is coming from there, but there comes a point where we've either developed everything we can develop or we've turned into brownfield development city, to be blunt, as some of my neighbors are looking at this.
I'll say just a couple things about that. Mac might want to add. First of all, to your first question, all the brownfield plans have our best estimates for the projections for when the payoff will occur. So the plans include explicit analysis of what the costs are going to be, how much those costs are going to be, what the property value is likely to be, and how long it's going to take. Now, they get adjusted based on what the real property values are, just like the hospital. But you can always see in these plans what our best estimates are for the time frame. To your second point, if we do our job well, and I mean, I'm very open to criticism that we're not doing our job well. But if we're doing our job well at the Brownfield Authority and the City Commission, then we are targeting places which will not otherwise be developed, or which will not otherwise be developed to such public benefit without us. And so it's a good problem to have that we are a lot of places, because if we're doing it right, then if we're going to places that would not see increased revenue from development otherwise. So your choice at these kinds of sites is to just accept that they're going to be abandoned and not worry about it, and you get what you get, or you try to catalyze these developments that would not otherwise occur, or would not otherwise occur with such benefits, and accept that it's going to take a while to realize those increased benefits. Waiting a while to get a benefit is better than never getting the benefit. And so again, assuming we're picking the sites well, and I think we are, then I don't think that it's a problem that there are too many brownfield sites. Only if we're competing with development that would have occurred just like it, without us, then I don't think that that's a worry.
Yeah, and I'll just say, a couple things to that is the Brownfield Authority has turned down a couple of projects that really didn't appear that like they were going to make a difference. The example is the Anytime Fitness facility that's next to Border Grill. That was an older kind of crappy building. The people came in and looking like it was an entitlement program, just give us the demo stuff. Brownfield Authority looked at it, said, are you going to do this anyway? Do you really need this incentive? And, they honestly said, and we, prodded them a little bit. They said, nah, not really. And so the Brownfield Authority turned that down and, turned down other projects. So it's not that every project that kind of comes in the door, is approved. And I think that one of the other things that we hope for here is that all of these investments kind of build the market. So even projects that may have been brownfield projects in the early days just to get something going don't need that anymore, because the market has built to a point where they can cover some of these marginal costs, demolition, perhaps, or site preparation, because the market now is good enough for them to develop those projects. So, we've seen that. I've seen that in other cities and communities. I'm from Traverse City, and we've seen that in Traverse, is that projects that would have been brownfield projects early on are no longer that way. Because the market has become strong enough for that. Now that has its downside for workforce housing, like David was talking about, and that's something that we now can target a little bit even more. Are you going to put in workforce housing? If you're not going to have workforce housing, we may not support your project, but we might be able to stimulate somebody that wasn't going to put workforce housing in, into their projects, if and where it makes sense.
Well, I guess one of my follow-up questions, and I may not be understanding this, but in the case of Shopko, in the case of the old hospital, how long do you wait before you decide, okay, nobody's going to pick this property up, let's declare it a brownfield and act accordingly? Is that a fair question?
Well, we can't on our own declare anything a brownfield development. We need a developer who's willing to actually invest. So it's a private investment. What we can do is we can incentivize private developers to do something they wouldn't otherwise do, or go somewhere they wouldn't otherwise go. But we don't actually have the ability to say, well, we're, as the Brownfield Authority, going to go develop someplace.
So in the case of Burger King, some developer was interested, but only if they could get this kind of financing or deal, or whatever word I'm looking for. Arrangement maybe is the best word.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And one of the other parts that's important about that, they had other locations that may have been farther out, but that was an ideal location, kind of stimulates and continues the West Washington development. In addition, most of that brownfield plan is for the extension of a water main. Again, private, public infrastructure improvement, where we can leverage, we hope to leverage, another state grant, 46% state grant, to provide infrastructure improvements for that whole West Washington area. So that's one of the benefits and reasons to that particular project.
Yeah, this is Patrick again. I will say that, amongst my neighbors, and there's a lot of head scratching over that particular project.
Yes.
And I just keep trying to defend the whole thing and just saying, there's a lot going on. There's a lot under that ground. Who knows what's going on, why they needed these incentives, but everyone says, what do you mean nothing's going in there? It's not going to be a vacant lot. It's not going to be an empty building. Somebody's going to put something there. There's been something there a long time, and that something there has been remodeled like 3 times in the last 25 years. And that, I think, is where it just, that conversation immediately shifts to accusational. And I find myself on my back foot, like, well, geez, I don't know.
And I think
you've got a point.
I think it's a legitimate point.
I'm sure you guys
general.
have taken some heat for it, or
Right.
had to address these concerns, right? And
In general,
so
there's
give
always
me
this
a
question.
script, so so I can
We're doing
defend it.
we do our best to predict what would happen with and without us.
Right,
And
right.
we maybe make mistakes sometimes. I don't think that one's a mistake, but
Right.
there's
Right.
people can make that argument.
Sure, yeah.
I will
Well,
say
they
in
are.
that other particular case that they also have environmental costs there. There was a
Right.
former dry cleaner that's contaminated that property. They have to
Yes,
put in a
yeah,
vapor mitigation system.
yeah.
And so there's some of that. So kind of the extra bonus, if you want to call it that, of demolishing the building is a relatively small component with the environmental issues on the site. And like I said, they had another option to go somewhere.
Sure.
Anybody else
sure.
who was developing that site would have had those same costs. And
Right.
but
right.
yeah, I mean, David raised a good point. But
well,
understand that particular project.
Yeah, and so I did bring up that, former dry cleaning site and the immediate responses. So, but it's okay to cook food there for 30 years and serve it to people, but you can't house money. I don't know. It just, that's the kind of
Yep.
hackles that I'm kind of getting just as a board member. And also, we'd probably be having these conversations anyway as neighbors and whatever.
Sure.
I
Probably wouldn't.
Yeah, I'll provide
Thank
one
you.
more detailed response to that is that vapor has become a much more highlighted issue
Yeah.
now in
Yeah.
terms of exposure pathways. It really wasn't even a factor 7 or 8 years ago. in
No, probably not.
consideration.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but now that is the primary way in which people can be exposed to contamination.
Sure.
You can always cover it up. We're on municipal
Well,
water, and
Yeah, right. And disturbing that site as it was, you are bound to, get some sort of particulate up and out in the air. So yeah, if you're going to do anything with it, that is now a concern. Where it wasn't if you were just going to put in another bouncy house ballroom inside the Burger King, right?
nope, actually, they probably would have had that same thing if they'd have left the building there.
Oh,
And then someone else would have come in. When you acquire it, you do the environmental assessment, they would have
Sure.
identified that they exceed those vapors and then had to do
Right.
something on that.
they would have had to do it anyway. Okay.
Yeah, if you're got a building there and you're operating and going on,
Yeah. Right.
ignorance is not bliss, but pretty close.
No, it's not. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mac. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Carol, did you have another question or comment?
Well, I was going to share that the feeling that I've gotten from some folks in my neighborhood, that there's just a resentment of this kind of thing. And frankly, I think it's a jealousy or a resentment of the opinion that somebody's making big money here. That's kind of how it's seen. There's also the resentment that you've already alluded to, which is we have lost the visibility of the lakeshore with some of this development. And so it's kind of like education and healthcare. It's kind of altruism versus financial realities. And the comment has been our city fathers are giving away everything in order to make money and taxes and yada, yada, yada. You probably know all that, but I'm just sharing what I've gotten from my neighborhood. The one thing I still need a little bit of help with, probably going to Mac, is these things are paid off based on how quickly the property value increases. Is that really what does it?
Yes.
And who determines that? An assessor or who?
Yep. The assessor does.
City
Yeah, it's
assessor.
based on the assessed value and they pay the same amount of taxes. DLP has a tax break, but everybody else pays their taxes in and that goes in, but the assessor determines the value of the property.
So basically, the faster the project goes, the more quickly we get higher tax returns.
Yeah, and you know, this is an issue always about development in general. I mean, this is much bigger than Brownfield.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, oh, yeah.
You know, cities always like the idea of really expensive properties because it's more taxes, and develop more, develop quicker, make it higher end is good from a pure taxing standpoint. And so it's also true that it pays off brownfields more quickly. And so it's also true that developers can make more money by putting in high end stuff. And so you do have to worry outside of brownfield. I mean, brownfield should think about all this as well, but it's a bigger issue than that. How does a community help steer the market pressures so that you get a kind of development that makes the city vibrant, whatever that means? And, you know, whether that includes affordable housing or not doing too much on the lakeshore or, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a difficult problem. And it's why communities like to grow fast and have expensive stuff. And I agree that that's a problem. But it's a problem which I think transcends the particular issues of brownfield. And I think Marquette is going to continue to struggle with this as property values go up and rich people come here looking for high-end housing. That's going to be something we're all going to have to struggle with.
And
Well, I think from my
yeah.
from my point of view, we've been battling dark stores, removing taxes. We've been battling, or we're coping with brownfield, which initially appears to be removing properties from the tax base, and the number of businesses that move, for example, from Marquette City to Marquette Township for lower taxes. So we're dealing, in my mind, with a triple whammy.
And the only thing I would say is I hope that I've convinced you that it is simply not true that brownfield is removing properties from taxable value. That's just simply false, because
well,
the value at the beginning continues to be taxed. And so that's just this is a mistake that people make, and we have to do a better job of educating them about this, because it just, that part is not true. Some of these other issues are real issues, but that one isn't.
Right, and that's what I'm trying to say, that the appearance or the public perception are those three things are involved, and that we're just plain losing ground in the city of Marquette. I understand why you're doing what you're doing, but it took me a while to catch what was really happening, when this seemed to have come up like in the last 5 years, big time or something. But anyway, yeah, so overall, that's why we in the library have been sitting here going, good gravy. I mean, the dark store thing was the big one, and then it just kind of one thing after another seems to snowball. So I appreciate your coming tonight. I don't mean this as a negative criticism, but I would suggest either I misunderstood it, which is possible, or you have a mistake in what was written on one of your first slides. And I think it had to do with the word with or without.
Oh.
You said the opposite of what is printed.
You know what? I think I saw that too. And I think I know what you're talking about. I think I missed it. Yeah.
Well, I'm a retired college prof. I will be for the rest of my life. And there's a word problem there that for your future presentations.
I blame the consultant.
Yeah, for your future presentations.
We're gonna do with you.
Fix that one. You got a typo, so to speak. But anyway.
Well, speaking of your slides, David, I was wondering if you would be willing to share those, if you'd be willing to send them.
Yes, and we sent an earlier version, but I'll send Andrea. I'll send you the current one, and then you can.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
That'd be nice.
I'll fix that word first.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We have a couple board members who
have,
couldn't make it tonight, so
that would be
It would be
great. I'm
nice
sure
to
Andrew would enjoy it.
yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you, everybody. We really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for
Thank you,
coming. It
guys.
was really
All of you.
helpful.
We appreciate your
And,
time and your efforts and what you're doing. Right?
Thanks a lot.
Yep.
Thank you.
Call us anytime if there's some
Good night.
questions or anything.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mac.
You're
Thank you all
welcome to
very much.
stay, but don't feel compelled.
Is that me? Can I go?
No, not you.
All right. I
But
may
you do
to
have to stay.
I may have to mute a couple times. We got the. We'll see.
Thank
We'll see
you
how
all.
it
Thank
works.
you all.
Okay. We're gonna move on to, that was really helpful. I'm really glad that they came and gave us all that information.
Mhm,
It was very clarifying for me.
absolutely.
So we're gonna move on to public comment.
Anybody?
Okay, hearing none.
Mhm.
Move on to Township Advisory Council report. Do we have one this month? Nope. All right. So it's on to financial reports. Hi, Rick.
Hey, Rick.
So I'll try and be brief. I guess is
Thank you.
there first any questions that any of the board members would like me to address from the financial reports themselves or my comments?
I had a question about your comment, and I did just read these shortly before the meeting. Am I correct in thinking that we had a retirement that we had not anticipated or something? There was a larger than expected payout of something or other. I forget the term. POT or PTO
Yeah,
or something.
yeah.
PTO
Personal time, yeah, so
off.
typically when someone retires, they'll have personal time off that they've accumulated that we pay
Right.
out. And so, so basically, one of the reasons why the cash position is down this year versus where it was last year is that we had an extra payroll that fell in October
Right.
this year. And then we also had the personal time off payout for our circulation retirement librarian there.
Okay. Okay.
So those are the two things. The other side of that, because if you'll remember in September, we actually were ahead in our cash position.
Right.
So the other thing that has occurred, and this ties into the discussion we just had with the Brownfield Authority people, is that our actual tax base now from the city of Marquette so far has generated revenue-wise, it's about $38,000 less this year versus last year. When you actually reflect that into the cash that we've gotten, I did that math, we're actually $51,000 down this year versus last year. And part of that will be made up. We have a little larger tax receivables that are still on our balance sheet of about 10,000. So it's coming in a little slower this year than it did in 2019. But it still shows that our tax base assessed value of the from the city of Marquette, that we're getting less taxes this year, which is something we anticipated. But again, that kind of, we have to see that trend reverse or the library is going to be in a more challenging position going forward. So it's
Okay,
good to
thank you.
see that the hospital is going to come onto the books potentially a little quicker than what we were hoping, but that still leaves you five
There's
to
still a
8
gap there,
years
but
of
yeah.
trying, how do we get through?
Right.
Expenses are going to continue to be increasing. Employees are expecting some amount of minimal raises. And if the tax base isn't increasing, where does the revenue come from to support those programs? So that's kind of the key thing that I wanted to get across to the board. And remind you again, this year we felt comfortable. We had enough of a fund balance that we could actually spend part of our fund balance to accommodate it. But
Right.
you know, that's not something you want to be doing on an annual basis for the
Year
next
after
5 to
year,
8
no.
years. You'll eat through the fund balance real quick, and you'll be back where it's minimal or non-existent fund balance. So that's kind of the comment. I guess the other good news is I'll end with a good story here. The BLP bill is again down by roughly $2,500 over where it was this time last year. So
Last year.
And I think there's still some opportunities. If you saw my notes, I met with Tom Mayo from ACC, and so
Right.
he better educated me on the control systems. And so there's some couple minor changes I've done. The schedule wise, I consolidated varied between air handlers, and then one of our floors is actually a little bit warmer than the other two, and there's no logic to why we're doing that. It just happens to be the way the controls are set up. So whether that's something we want to continue, I have to catch up with Andrea. So see if there's any reasons that she's aware of for that. So.
Okay, thank you, Rick.
So unless there's some other questions, I'll let the meeting move on to other topics. So.
Well, and Rick, I do think it is important that you compared it to, the BLP cost to this time last year, and you had already made huge strides in reducing that bill by then. So it's sort of exponentially shrunk. So thank you. So come over here. And
I'm not sure November's going to show up that way, because normally we do not have an air conditioning 5 days in November, and we experienced that the first week of November. So
that's an exception. So we'll take it.
Yeah, it was worth having it, wasn't it?
Yeah, remember it fondly.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Are there other questions or comments about the financial reports?
No, I have none, Mr. Patrick.
May I have a motion to approve the bills?
So moved. Oh,
second.
Thank you.
Throw one at one is Patrick and the other's me. Who cares which is?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll
That's
do
all we got.
yeah. Roll call vote. Carol, how do you vote to approve the bills?
Aye.
Patrick, how do you vote?
Aye.
This is Ann. I also vote aye. So that passes 3-0. Moving on to Personnel Committee recommendation for library page wages. Wait, did I say that right? I did.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, you did.
Did everybody have a chance to read Andrea's background info?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
thank you for providing that.
yeah, I mean, Carol and I are the personnel committee, so we're well aware of the recommendation. So really, I think it comes down to you, Patrick. Do you have questions or comments?
No, it was very clear, and I certainly appreciated it being spelled out that way to have some context for sure.
Do you have go ahead.
I did speak with Andrew too. He called yesterday to let me know that he wasn't going to be able to attend due to his travels. And so I asked him if he had any thoughts on this proposal. And he said that he thought it was a fine proposal. And we chatted a little bit about some of the details of the background information, specifically the MIT document. He also had a question about the session that Ann and I attended for the Michigan Library Association conference. He was not clear about what my questions were that I asked Kevin at that session. So essentially what I asked him is for a definition of living wage and what that actually translates into, which is what led me to go to the MIT study, because he did say that is typically it's typically terminology used for those who are working a full-time job or full-time equivalent. So when I went to the MIT documentation, it was spelled out pretty clearly that that is also the documentation or the definition that was used for their figures.
Well, and it's important to point out 40 hours, because that was always full-time in my life, but now there's certain qualifications where 32 is considered that, and that's definitely spelled out as 40. So that was something that jumped out at me.
Ready to make the recommendation.
Are you ready, Patrick? Is that okay?
Yes, I am. Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay.
Carol.
The Library Board of Trustees of the Peter White Public Library move to set library page wages at minimum wage plus 20 cents. This rate will be implemented on the start of the library's fiscal year, October 1st, for the minimum wage rate effective in Michigan as of January 1 of the following year. This will be in place until the adoption of a new AFSCME contract in 2022. Current library pages will receive a wage of $10.07 retroactive to October 1st, 2020.
I will second.
Any comments or questions? Hearing none, I'll
Thank you,
do a,
Carol, for reading that.
yeah. Carol, how do you vote?
Aye.
Patrick, how do you vote?
I,
This is Anne. I also vote aye. It passes 3-0. And next up, we have the remote work policy. And this is a first reading, so we can actually vote on it next month. Yeah, I mean, it's a policy about remote work, as I said.
oh, come on.
I've lost my
really?
words, sorry.
Yeah, this is something that has come out from the MDHHS emergency orders. And it's interesting because the last two orders have included this, and there's still very little guidance about what should actually be contained or covered by this policy. So in the interest of time and making sure that we are in compliance, I decided that we should just go ahead and have a first reading on this policy. I do have a couple of informational sessions that I'll be attending over the next month. And actually the biggest one, which is with Foster Smith, won't happen until the 18th of December, which is after our board meeting. But I'm hoping that because the Library of Michigan works so closely with Ann Ciernick, we'll actually get some guidelines this Friday at the
Okay.
director meeting. That takes place every other Friday from the Library of Michigan. So I'm hopeful that those guidelines will come out, if not this time, the following meeting. I think they're all just trying to figure out what exactly should be contained in it. We could, of course, pay Foster Smith a couple $100s for them to draft this policy for us. But I feel like, we already have a lot of the policy in place. We already refer to a remote work plan for staff during this time. So I don't see a real need for spending that money on this particular policy, but it may change significantly before next month's meeting based on what information I get from the Library of Michigan. But it's a pretty generic policy at this point, just saying that, we'll work with staff to create a remote work situation that makes sense. Bruce and I tweaked some of the wording today. There were a few things about making sure that your remote work environment is free from distraction. And I don't remember what the other one was that we were both kind of like, oh, well, that's not real. That's not a reality for most people working from home. So we changed the wording a little bit to just ask that, it's this section here, create a remote work environment that takes into consideration employee safety, ergonomics, and ability to concentrate. And then keeping careful records of time worked actively on job duties, ensuring time needed for home responsibilities are not being reported as time worked. Just so that we're asking staff to, not that you can ever get rid of all the home distractions that occur when you're working remotely, but to just be transparent about it and say, yeah, I worked from home today, but I actually only actively worked about 4 hours because I was also trying to school my child, and my dog puked on the floor, and whatever else happens when you're working remote.
Yeah.
That's good.
That's about all I have to say.
I'm sorry, I'm wearing my teacher hat again, and I'm not sure which this should be. When you look at letter 4B, keep careful records of time worked actively on job duties, ensuring time needed, etc. Is not being reported or are not being reported?
Sure.
It's talking about time. Should it be is?
Where at, Carol?
I'm on 4B.
I see that, but where would the is go?
Ensuring
instead of
time
are.
needed is being, it's not responsibilities we're talking about, it's time. So I think it should be is.
Yep, that's a good
Sorry, my
catch.
teacher hat is on today, apparently. This kind of
For-
thing to me is
for
really
copy, then I-
hard. It's really hard to do because you get so involved in it, you miss things like this.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you see anything else, send it to me.
I think this is a good job. As I read it, I couldn't think of anything, nothing jumped out to me that I thought was missed.
Okay. Well, after the meeting on Friday, if there are any significant gaps in the policy from what you see here, I will certainly send out some updates. Not on the day of the next board meeting.
Well, don't
How
worry,
about that?
this happened so suddenly. I mean, we could see it coming, but still, it was, to me, somewhat sudden.
Absolutely.
No, I think you continue to address it incredibly well. So
Yes.
thank you.
Sounds good. Moving on, if that's all right with everyone.
Mhm.
Public comment. Hearing none, we're going to move on to old business, which is the director evaluation and goals. I know Andrew sent me a message and said they looked good for him. And I mean, we just wanted to make sure that they're part of the public record. And Andrea, thank you for doing a good job. I know it's been well, I mean, all of the library staff, but we're talking about you specifically right now.
Right, yes, your name is
you-
on there.
Yeah, you've done a really, really good job and under, I mean, circumstances no one ever imagined. So
Yes,
Thank you.
exactly.
And I don't know if you know this, and you probably wouldn't be the one to openly acknowledge it, but there are other entities in this community that are following your lead. So you are not only, you're setting a very good example as to how things can be done. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing the that Google review today.
Not
I
fun.
Yeah.
wrote that.
That made my heart happy.
And write that. I can't write like that.
I know.
Well, but I certainly agree with it. You know, every phrase and sentence is true.
For sure.
Well, when Alyssa sent that, I read through it as I was reading it, thinking this person is like in a time warp or something.
Right,
They're not living in
right.
the same reality.
Right,
And then
right.
it mentioned COVID at the end, and I thought, okay, all right, it isn't a time traveler. It's a real person.
Well, I was in the library yesterday. I may have to ask library employees to forbid me to go into the friends area. I walked out with having bought, I don't know how many books and DVDs, but at any rate, I was intrigued at the line at circulation. It was like, okay, everybody, now's the time they're open. And we had a line 5 or 6 deep and 2 or 3 lines that way. So I'm thrilled that we are able to be open and keep, I mean, everybody just seemed happy. And I got some printing done and some copying done and bought things and checked out things and, you know, on. And everybody was enjoying the availability.
Mhm.
Yeah, we're really hoping that we don't have to go back completely to curbside. We're just
Mhm.
gonna keep a close eye on the status of things.
Mhm.
And if we need to, we need to, but, you know, I'm really hoping that we can keep this minimal level of in-person service, because for the most part, there's always gonna be exceptions.
Sure.
For the most part, people have been really, really good. They've
Yeah.
come in, they have complied with all of our requests. You know, of course, we have the handful that you constantly have to say, put it up over your nose, put it up over your nose.
Mhm.
You know, it's not a diaper. But for the most part, people are just so happy to be in the library that they're extremely compliant.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, there are no rights without responsibilities, so. And I've got a daughter who's thrilled to have her first couple of JTAB sessions under her belt, so
Nice.
things are going well.
Good.
There she is waving right there.
Mhm.
All right. Well, moving on to new business. The Library of Michigan created a new trustee manual for 2020, and you will be getting a paper copy sometime later this year. And yeah, I mean, you saw the trustee times, which is,
Right.
I'm excited about that. I know that's very nerdy of me, but I don't care.
You can be nerdy when it comes to libraries,
Yeah.
Anne.
Mhm.
Well, I could just be nerdy, like that's fine.
Well, that's probably true too, but anyway.
But it does feel like an opportunity to go back to like discussing one chapter a month like we did a few years ago,
Mhm.
because there are updates and the Open Meetings Act has changed. And I am still a little befuddled by what the changes are, because I've decided I'm waiting until the end of the year to decide what we need to do in January, because I suspect it's going to change again.
Yeah, I
It's
would
gonna-
think you might want to keep your options open, or at least come up with a long list.
Yeah, so. But basically, this is just an FYI for you guys
Mhm.
that you're aware that we'll be working on that. And there is a trustee training on Thursday at 10 a.m., the advanced trustee workshop. And they actually extended it. It was supposed to be an hour. They've made it 90 minutes, so they have enough time to cover everything and answer questions. And I realize not everyone's available at 10 o'clock on a Thursday morning. So, but just be aware that that opportunity is there.
I'm
Did re-
assuming we had to register for that or something, which I have not done. I was aware it was coming, but I lost track of the time. So where would I need to go to sign up? Or because somehow I've got to get on Zoom, I assume.
Right. I can send you the link to the registration. I'll do it after we're
Okay.
done here.
If you could, I would like to try to attend at least part of it.
Yep, I can do that. I'm
Thank
sure
you.
they'll take you up until the time it starts. This is,
Okay,
They did record the first session, so I assume they're gonna record this next session as well and make that available.
oh,
okay.
good. Okay. All right, moving on. Well, does anybody have questions or comments about the trustee manual or trustee training? No, okay. Standing reports. I have a question for Heather. In your report, there was a number that didn't make sense to me. I think there's a comma out of place or a period missing, or,
Let me grab it.
They call that a decimal in their numbers.
yeah, see, thank you.
Oh, picky.
Oh, I got my teacher hat.
Can you tell I'm a
Touche.
wordy girl?
Touche,
Well,
Patrick.
I am too. That's the only math question I can. Done.
Oh, I see what you're talking about, Anne. The first line there.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. Yep.
Oh,
It's huge. Yeah,
Not
so
me,
right there.
$27 million since October 1st.
darn it.
I
You've been busy.
apologize.
Only 39 gifts too. That's great.
Then
Good
we wouldn't
return.
care about the brownfield, right?
Right. You know,
Well,
I've started
right
my own
at it.
tax capture scheme here. That was a
Yeah.
joke. Oh, it's
Big deal.
$27,855. flat.
That's
Okay.
still
Okay.
an
Oh, but
impressive
it's just
figure,
this
so.
fiscal year, so it's just
Since
since
October
October
1st.
1st.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
just
got it.
take out the 2 zeros, basically.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
Or put a comma in there.
Unfortunately,
yeah.
a
Boo.
decimal, Patrick, a decimal.
I know. Semicolon, that's what it is.
No, not
There we go.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I was
no problem. Thanks for asking.
confused, but now I'm not confused about that.
There we go.
Correspondence, we talked about the Google review. I didn't see any other correspondence.
Had a couple from Sarah that didn't make it into the packet because they didn't get, the attachments didn't come through. Let me see if I can pull them up real quick.
Okay. I would like to say I'm so happy. This is, anyway, I'm happy that the 2 books experiment with the homeschool book club has led to, trying it for more stuff. Thank you, Sarah. That program was the best part of 2 books this year. And well, I don't know if it was the best part, but it was a really good part.
A
And
highlight, yes.
yeah, a highlight. Thank you, Patrick. And makes me happy that it'll,
There we go.
oh, look at that.
Wow.
Can you read it? Do I need to make it larger?
Packs, very nice.
Could you increase it a little bit, please? That's good, thank you.
Full model set. Bravo.
So nice when people take the
Wow.
time to write things like this.
Yes. Don't you think it represents a whole lot of people who didn't
Oh, yeah.
have the time or whatever it is that
Yeah,
to write it down?
take the initiative.
Yeah.
Oh,
Aw,
that's great.
yay.
Are you ready for the next one?
As
Sure.
long as
Yep.
it's
I-
nice, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, if it's not, don't put it
Yeah,
up.
no, you can skip it.
Here we go.
Oh, family packs again, nailing it with that.
Yep, yep.
Aw. So nice.
Yeah, it gets even longer there. Right
I know it's not
first.
public comment, but if I can just say real quick about family packs, I think
Mhm.
some folks panicked that we were going to close and they were going to get left without books because we've had
Right.
14 family pack requests since the 15th,
Yeah.
How many?
which 14 since
Wow.
the 15th. And that's not counting school packs. I don't know how many school packs we put together since then.
Right.
So
Holy
So
cow.
just people getting ready for what may come. That's, again, that's if that's very telling that that's one of like the top 3 things that a family will do immediately when they think something
Yeah.
bad is coming.
Mm-hmm.
Right after they buy the toilet tissue.
Yeah, right. It's yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
We've had a lot of library in a bag requests in the past 2 days too, Sarah, like more than
Yeah,
ever in a 2-day period. Yeah.
Yeah.
right.
Oh, I
wish-
think part of that too is people are concerned about going out. They
Sure.
are concerned about,
Absolutely.
what's happening in our community. So
Yeah. I've been in self-imposed lockdown since the beginning of October.
How's that working out?
Well, it's fine for me,
You
but
look
my
great.
poor husband has been tortured.
Oh, is that why we can't see Neil? He's in the
Yeah.
basement.
He's hiding.
Yeah. I'll be right over, Neil.
and the chapter book club. So in the handwritten letter, the longer letter, that was her favorite thing.
Right.
The youngest one in the group was in this family, and her mother has told me a couple of times that it was Sylvie's favorite thing this year is
Yeah.
doing chapter
Aw.
book club.
Right.
Yay.
Yeah, that's
No.
cool.
The 2 books, 2 communities.
Right. That's awesome.
Yeah, those were good picks this year. I hope we get it right next year too, but that's a different topic, sorry. Back to standing reports. Other questions or comments about those? I mean, thank you all for the work you do,
Yeah,
and I appreciate those reports. It's really helpful and helps me feel like I'm well informed about what's happening at the library.
I find it impressive to read all of this and know that all of this is going on, even though the building isn't open all of the hours it normally is.
Mhm.
We're doing so much online and Zoom meetings and all that kind of stuff. And when I was in yesterday, I was stunned to see those herb packages that you could pick up thyme or basil and grow it at home and so on. And I was just impressed all the way around.
It's an impressive place,
It is.
With impressive people.
definitely.
Too.
Yep.
Okay.
Doesn't sound like we have any other questions or comments tonight. Is that right?
No, I just on the TAC meeting on the 2nd, is that like the
Oh, yeah.
annual joint meeting or is that, what is that? Do I have to be there? That's what I'm asking.
No, you don't have
That's the bottom line.
I'm just excited that I cornered them into having a Zoom meeting. I said,
Good.
look, we have not
Oh.
had a meeting since March. This
And
has to happen.
I wish
Good for you.
all the best.
Good luck.
Yeah, I wish you all the best. If you think seeing Augie standing in a windowsill in his diaper is not going to be topped by that, what you're going to witness there, you're in for some. Which
Yeah,
I enjoy that. That's
The
best
sad
part of
news
the
is
meeting so
I
far.
think we've got a couple TAC members who are needing to be off the TAC, so we may have a couple
Oh.
vacancies to fill. I know
Yeah.
Lainey Stevens, who's been the president for the last several years, she has indicated that she can't continue anymore. So
Oh,
we do
no.
have a few vacancies to fill, and you know, a lot of it just has to do with home life
Sure.
issues
Sure.
that they just
Sure.
need to not be on TAC anymore. So
Yeah, I hate to see Lainey go. I'm completely understanding that she's got some other stuff to do, but she was very involved.
So we'll see what happens on the December 2nd meeting. I did, request that everybody attend. So hopefully we'll get at least most of them in attendance, and we'll see what everybody's situation is. But I'm thinking we have 2 that are going to want to go off.
Yeah.
That's the feeling I'm getting right now.
Okay.
So I'll keep you updated on that.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Oh,
then
and
our
the
next
maintenance
meeting is
person
the
starts
15th. Oh yeah.
the end of the month, right?
30th, yes.
Okay,
And who is that?
that's exciting.
His name is John Povey.
Oh, okay.
He's actually from the Sioux area, but he did work out at KI Sawyer when the base was out there for
Mhm.
several years. He was with the
Mhm.
Air Force, and he ran a crew of airplane repair. I'm sorry, I'm losing all my words at the moment. He's got a lot of good background. One of the things that when we did the interviews, he stuck out with for us was number one, he has got a great personality. He's very engaging, but also he's worked on a lot of boilers and had to do maintenance on car wash boilers. So I feel like if he can manage car wash boilers, he can certainly handle our little building boilers.
Yeah.
So hopefully that rings true, but he
Mhm.
does have a lot of good maintenance and management experience. And those were the 2 things we were really looking for. I will say we had 6 interviews and 2 candidates who were very equally matched. We had kind of a hard time deciding, but really what it came down to is we felt like John had the better combination of experience and personability.
Fit for sure.
Yeah.
Well, great. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, anything else for the good and welfare? Doesn't sound like it. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll
Go,
second.
Patrick.
Carol, how do you vote?
I vote yay.
Patrick, how do you vote?
Yep.
This is Ann. I also vote aye. We are adjourned at 6:39.
All righty. Good
Yeah.
meeting, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks very much.
everybody.